I was not expecting Monster Hunter World to hit me as hard as it did, but it's been a good 500 hours of mostly pure fun. Get the hell down here, stupid bird. I did just about everything I wanted to in the base game and left it very well satisfied, but I jumped on Iceborne right away just for the excuse to keep playing, although it did come with some reluctance at the $40 price tag. This video assumes that you already have a basic idea of the game, so if you haven't played Monster Hunter World's original release, or if you haven't seen my review on it, then I would suggest watching that first. The story continues with a massive flock of Legiana leaving the New World continent in droves. Since the ecosystem is sensitive and all these monsters suddenly migrating can disrupt the balance, the Commission of Hunters must follow them to the snow-covered plains of Hoarfrost Reach and figure out what's got them all riled up. It's very similar to the base game where so-and-so monster gets rowdy, we need to investigate this and that, handler almost gets both of you killed, as is per usual, yada yada, etc, etc. I was okay with the story the first time around, but nothing really new happens here, so it starts to feel a little bit pointless. It tries to put a greater emphasis on this guy and this old lady, but it's like, I don't know, for what? The setting and atmosphere is still awesome, but the cutscenes can drag on a little bit. Newly added is the ice and snow-based Hoarfrost Reach, which is a great area to explore. The general layout reminds me of Wildspire Waste in that it's pretty straightforward and mostly feels flat. But there's also an underground area and the map is a bit larger than it seems at first. Thankfully, it's nowhere near as confusing as Ancient Forest, and it's a pretty easy map to navigate. And that's it. There's only one new map added to the game, which is a pretty big letdown. There is another map unlocked after the credits roll, but we'll get to that later. The only traditional new map in the game is Hoarfrost Reach. Don't worry about the story making you spend a ton of time there though. It's pretty funny to me that about half the game, if not more, takes place in the previous maps. You are hunting new monsters, but you don't actually spend a whole lot of time in new areas. Well, maybe I should put a couple of quotations around new monsters. Don't get me wrong, there are a total of 13 brand new monsters that weren't in the base game, including a completely different final boss and Rajang, who was added in soon after launch. Aside from Beotodus, who's just a snow-covered version of Juratados, all of the new monsters are pretty great and bring some good variety to the game. Unfortunately, the game pushes a lot of subspecies as well. Coral Puke Puke is pretty cool, but most of the others, such as Fulgur Anjanath and Ebony Odogaron, are so similar to their original counterparts that I can barely tell what's different about them at all. It comes off as lazy. I would rather that half these variants were scrapped entirely, as opposed to padding out the missions more. The new add-on to the game's combat is known as the Clutch Claw, and while it is pretty cool, I find its implementation to be rather clunky. It allows the player to hook onto particular body parts and weaken it, making it much easier to stun and break monsters with following attacks. Furthermore, a monster can be hooked onto its face, redirected, and thrown into a wall, dealing insane damage on top of knocking it unconscious. The Clutch Claw offers some extremely powerful abilities, but it comes with several issues. For starters, it can be very annoying just trying to aim this thing. As a hammer user, I only ever want the head, but half the time I'll grab onto something else by accident. There's also a cooldown of sorts that dictates when you're allowed to redirect and throw a monster, which is fine, that makes sense, but this hidden timer is extremely unclear. I'm also pretty sure that this is impossible to do when a monster is enraged, but I can never tell when half of them are mad or not. Even when a monster is stunned and drooling, it doesn't seem to work sometimes. It's very unclear when this ability is allowed to be used, and that can place you in dangerous situations as using it improperly can leave the player open to attack. All of this makes the Clutch Claw a real pain and not fun at all, but you gotta use it because of how strong it is. You're handicapping yourself if you ignore it. The whole Clutch Claw thing is just annoying and I don't like it. Another thing about the combat that's pretty crazy is the overabundance of AoE attacks, or area of effect attacks. It used to be noteworthy of a few monsters like Juratados or Barat's Mud, but now it seems like a ton of monsters have some kind of lingering effect that they just leave out on the field. It's a neat way to mix up the battles and give players another obstacle to keep an eye out for, and I think for the most part it was pulled off well here. Most of the attacks are pretty creative, although a couple of them, namely Nightshade Paolumu and Brachydios, have effects that stick around a little too long for my taste. So about that additional map. After the game is completed, the player gains access to the Guiding Lands. This is a sprawling, multi-ecosystem environment where it seems every monster in the game can come and go randomly. However, you only get access to the weaker monsters at first. You'll need to level up each individual region by killing and capturing monsters, as well as by examining their tracks to lure out higher targets. It sounds like a neat little diversion at first, but where I draw the line is that a few of the game's monsters are exclusively locked behind the higher region levels. There are also several materials, including mining and bone piles, that are exclusive to the Guiding Lands. Furthermore, and I never experienced this myself, probably because I never bothered to get too deep into the Guiding Lands, but it's apparently possible to lose levels in a region, so you'd better make sure you get everything you need from somewhere before moving on. Why the hell does it have to be designed like this? It's yet another grind on top of a game that already has plenty of grinding, and it feels incredibly pointless. Why the hell would I want to hunt random monsters in the Guiding Lands when I can normally pick and choose from a normal list and gather the materials that I want to focus on for future gear that interests me? But you gotta do Guiding Lands because Zinogre and a few others are locked behind it. So if you want the top tier gear, then you're stuck in this massive loop of a grind. If you can capture an exclusive monster in the Guiding Lands, then it'll show up as a regular arena quest, and you can also obtain investigations too. Both of these options aren't as good as simply having a permanently fixated optional quest, but I guess at the very least it's something. However, it still doesn't change the fact that you have to level up the particular region before you even get started on all this. Even though monsters have very low health in the Guiding Lands, and leveling up appears to advance pretty quickly, it still seems like a really stupid idea and a total waste of time. The only thing Guiding Lands seems good for is as a sort of monster randomizer if you just want to play for 20 minutes and you don't want to think about what monster to kill. That's perfectly fine, and going in there with a few buddies to kill time might be pretty cool. But again, locking several monsters behind it, which also grant access to some of the strongest gear, is ridiculously absurd. That's about all there is to this game. Most of the weapons got a few new attacks, which is really nice, and of course the standard progression of killing monsters, building armor, and killing more monsters is still what Monster Hunter is all about. This is still a fine expansion through and through, but it's a lot of the new stuff, especially the Clutch Claw and the Guiding Lands, that brings down the whole experience. Not to mention that $40 price tag is awfully hefty. I get that Capcom experimented quite a bit here in order to offer something unique, but I feel as though it wasn't implemented all that well. If you absolutely loved Monster Hunter World and you feel the need for more, which was the same position I was in, then Iceborne should serve you nicely. However, do keep your expectations a little in check. If this is the direction that Monster Hunter wants to go in now, then I'll have to rethink if I would want to buy the inevitable next expansion.
Acidic Blackness, successfully hunted. Amazing work!
Thanks for watching my review on Monster Hunter World Iceborne.